The Atlanta Falcons and the Detroit Lions both did the unforgivable in the NFL draft this year by drafting a running back in the first round, and now they're doing everything that they can to convince you that they didn't. We got all that and much more on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, we're already on fire for this one. Welcome in, football fans. It's the Locked On NFL podcast, the daily podcast breaking down all the biggest stories from around the National Football League. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, every dayers, for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, you can subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we are your hosts here on this Tuesday episode of Locked On NFL. Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL on Twitter. Myself, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. Think about your favorite two people doing a thing. We're better than them. Thank you very much for being here with us. On today's episode of Locked On NFL, we're going to get to Yike and Like, of course. We're going to take a look at the unsigned but still available free agents out there that can help take your favorite team over the top. But first, we start with the Detroit Lions and the Atlanta Falcons. Most immediately, the Atlanta Falcons, I hope, because both of them did the cardinal sin of the NFL draft, Luke, and they're trying to convince us that they didn't.
Yeah, look, man, both of these teams, this is who they want to be, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you look at the way that the Lions have built, the way the Falcons have built, they want to be like run first, ground and pound, physical teams. And we've all at this point seen, bite kneecaps, that whole deal, right? Arthur Smith's trying to build his next iteration of the Derrick Henry, Titans offense. Like, it's very clear that's what they've been trying to do. And so they both take running backs in the first round, high in the first round, 8 and 12 respectively.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all seen at this point the arguments for why you're not supposed to do that, and why that the value of running backs and how the contracts don't really measure up, and how the value of a running back is like really muddled and all that. We've seen that. I'm not going to go over that. But what bugs me here is that the Falcons and the Lions have come out and said, no, it's not. We didn't just draft a running back. No. We drafted a wide receiver too. They can play both positions, which is not true of these two players.
No.
You can split a running back out wide. At this point, most teams have a way to split a running back out wide as like a subversive thing to do. You do it to get a man zone indicator, because who travels out with that guy? If a linebacker runs out and lines up outside with the running back, it's probably man to man because they're looking for a matchup. If a cornerback is out there, then you have a zone indicator because that guy's going to cover whoever's out there. So
right.
And then you motion that running back in, or maybe you have them run like a slant or a stupid little button hook or something like that. And that's fine. That is the way that most teams utilize running backs. That is more or less the way that Texas and Alabama utilize their running backs.
Yep.
Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, they split out sometimes. They ran a limited route tree, but most of their receiving production came out of the backfield. Screens, checkdowns, flare outs, angle routes, the classic running back tree. Like for Jahmyr Gibbs in particular, him in the pass game is like kind of the point of him as a receiving weapon, but it's as a receiving running back. But you cannot, in any good faith, tell me that if you wanted a pass catching weapon and you took Bijan Robinson over every wide receiver who was on the board, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jordan Addison, Quentin Nelson, Zay Flowers, all of those guys that went later in the first, those guys are going to do more for you in the pass game, just bar none. So you don't have to lie. That's the thing here.
It's fine. I'm just agreeing with you.
This is who you are. You're co-signing.
I'm co-signing.
This is who you are. It's like, look, the same 6 Twitter accounts are going to yell at you for for drafting a running back.
It's like me and 5 other people.
Yeah, right. And that's okay. But like, be who you are, especially the Lions, who are building this like physical team of kneecap biters. Right. Admit it. Why are you denying it? You drafted a running back because you want to run the ball a lot. Just say you did it. Who cares? Yeah. Be you. Live your truth. Come on, Lions. You're so close to being something real. For the first time in my lifetime.
Right. And the thing I will say about Jahmyr Gibbs is that like this this narrative makes a lot more sense. And you're saying the same thing, but like this narrative makes a lot more sense for Jahmyr Gibbs than it does for Bijan Robinson, because last year at Alabama, like Jahmyr Gibbs was bar none Alabama's best pass catcher last season. They had a pretty solid tight end. They had a couple of good wide receivers, things like that. But like they did motion him out wide. They did utilize him. They did have him run routes and things like this. But for me, like the place where I get this, and this is going to come off so homerish, and honestly, I'm fine with it. The place that it really bugs me is when it comes to Bijan Robinson and the Atlanta Falcons. It is my right, dagnabbit. And so when I look at it, I'm so heckin' ticked. But like when I look at it with the Atlanta Falcons, like you just drafted gosh darn it. You just drafted this blue chip running back, like one of the best running back prospects in a long time, better than the guys that we oftentimes compare him to as well, right? Like people tend to like compare him to Saquon Barkley and all that. I think he's better than what Saquon Barkley was as a prospect, but he's a more polished runner. He's a more like he's a more precise runner, all of these other things. And so you draft the best running back in the group, and you draft one of the best running backs that we've seen go through the draft process in the last 10 years. And you have the nerve, the gall, the absolute, like, just insanity to look me in the face and say, yeah, well, they're not just using me as a running back, right? Like we're going to use them out as a wide. Get out of my face. Stop immediately. Press pause. Rewind. Stop all this. We're not going to be bamboozled, hoodwinked, and run amok. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, you drafted Bijan Robinson. He's a running back. Let him run the ball. That's what you got him for.
And that's what they're going to do. Like, why are you lying?
No one's fooled right now. Like, nobody else in the NFC South. Like, I can promise you right now that Joe Woods and Dennis Allen did not call up Mickey Loomis, all part of the New Orleans Saints, and go, guys, they're using Bijan as a wide receiver. What do we do? How do we adjust? Like, no one's doing that. You're not fooling anybody. There's no gamesmanship to this. You're just placating. Like, that's all that you're doing.
It's like, you're just like patronizing.
Yes.
We can handle
it. Much better word.
If you look at like what the 49ers are doing on their offense, right? They get big a lot. They use 12P a lot. They, tight ends, Kyle Juszczyk, bigger players, Deebo Samuel. They've got big guys blocking you. And the way defenses are headed right now, there's a lot of more finesse. There's a lot more, Isaiah Simmons style, not him literally, but like Isaiah Simmons style players, tweeners. You're not doing the 4-6 85 Bears defense anymore. Everything's about speed on defense. And so, you zig while everybody else zags, and there you go. You get big and punch them in the mouth. That's what these teams are trying to do. I totally get it. I think it's a perfectly valid strategy, even though, it doesn't like measure up on positional value or whatever. I get where they're headed with it, but you don't have to pretend that you're going to like put Bijan Robinson on the outside and run a sluggo. Like, let me see Jahmyr Gibbs do a double move against a 6'2" corner at 220 pounds. And then we can talk about him being a real wide receiver. But no, you drafted a running back with pass catching utility. That is a thing that has its own value.
Right.
Stop lying.
Just stop. Stop lying, Lions. See what I did there? All right. Well, all right. Speaking of segues, the next thing that we're going to take a look
quick, get out of it.
The next thing that we're going to take a look at are the free agents that could potentially put your favorite franchise over the top, unless your favorite franchise is the Atlanta Falcons or the Detroit Lions, because there's no saving them. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. Already a spicy one, and we're just through the first part. Got that coming up for you as we continue on here on Locked On NFL.
Before we get into that, if you want to short these gosh darn teams, these hooligans, these ne'er-do-wells, you can do that on FanDuel. FanDuel.com/lockedon. If you've never made a bet before, you can go to FanDuel and sign up. Get that no sweat first bet. That means up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you whiff on that first bet. If you thought that, maybe perhaps Jimmy Butler will finally cool down in the playoffs, and then
Not
nope,
happening.
You were wrong. That's all right. You might get some bonus bets back if you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up there to get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000. FanDuel has all kinds of things: NFL futures, division odds, and stuff like that. MLB games, hockey games, basketball games, of course, those in their playoffs right now. You can bet all kinds of things. The app is safe, secure, and super easy to use, and you get instantly paid out when you win. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get that no sweat first bet. Get that $1,000 back in bonus bets if you whiff, and get on going. Get on going. Make every moment more at FanDuel.com/lockedon.
All right, everybody, we're continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. Jimmy Butler, by the way, best player left in the NBA playoffs as of right now. Like, LeBron James is the best player all time, right? Left in these playoffs, but Jimmy Butler is the best player in these playoffs right now. So I wanted to blur the lines a little bit. My friends over at Locked On NBA will come and tackle me later. Appreciate all the everydayers out there.
Also blurring the lines,
Yeah. That's true. See what I did there with the
getting in the spirit.
You caught it. Appreciate you to all the everydayers out there making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day. Every day it's Tuesday, so you've got the just the worst pair in the world in Luke Braun and Ross Jackson, but still better than anything.
Off track.
Listen. You're not going to have this kind of fun anywhere else. All right. You're going to get good, smart football talk with good laughs, and dag nabbit, I am pleased to bring it. Gosh darn it.
The dag nabbit counter up to two.
Up to two. Up next here, we're going to take a look now at, free agents that can move the needle for your franchise. Everybody right now, your favorite team has made a bunch of different moves over the course of the offseason, but still have like one or two little spots remaining where they could do a little bit of extra work. And there's some pretty good free agents still out there that could potentially move the needle for you. So Luke, just a couple of the free agents out there that you think move the needle for players or potential teams. I want to start with one that is like right off at the top of the list for me, which is Yannick Ngakoue. And this is a guy I've been talking about over on Locked On Saints a bunch, because I think about what they still need. They lost a really good pass rushing linebacker in Caden Ellis. They lost some of their defensive interior, and they're really young behind Cameron Jordan when it comes to edge rushers. So a veteran edge rusher would make a lot of sense for this team. This team has gone down the road quite a bit, a couple of times actually, with Jadeveon Clowney. We all know now that that's not worth the pursuit time. But a guy like Yannick Ngakoue, who has had at least 8 sacks every single season of his career, yes, some of those sacks can be weighted a lot lighter than others because they were a game time, in-game situations where, another team was at a deficit and they were kind of scrambling around and he brought them down toward the end of the game and all that. Totally get it. But still, to walk away with 8 sacks every season since you come into the NFL,
that's a skill too.
That's
like
really
that
great.
Ability to clean up is
still being able to do that, right?
Yeah, like chase a guy down. There's an athleticism to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got good size, got good speed, doesn't really have like a remarkably concerning injury history at all. Still out on the market. And I thought that he was going to be one of those guys that got scooped up really, really quickly after May 1st when the compensatory free agent period came to an end, which means that when teams signed players, they were no longer potentially canceling out compensatory picks that they got for some of their free agents that had already signed elsewhere earlier in the offseason. So I like a guy like Yannick Ngakoue to come in and potentially pair up with a veteran somewhere and help to lead maybe a younger unit behind him. And sort of this guy who's been a journeyman despite being really productive throughout his career. So I like what a guy like Yannick Ngakoue could potentially bring to a team looking for edge help.
What if I told you that if you were a team that needed some offensive line help, that there was a 28-year-old consistent starter of a guard out there on the market looking for a second contract?
I'd take it. I'd
Dalton
call
Reisner.
him myself. Who?
Dalton Reisner. He's been out on the market for a while. That guard market's been weird. I think if you ask Broncos fans, you go, yeah, no, I don't want any part of him or whatever. But there are a lot of teams trotting something out that's worse than Dalton Reisner. And this is the juncture at which you can get guys and you don't need to pay them $15 million,
Yeah. This is the sweet spot for a lot of NFL franchises. And Luke, I'm curious to know if you think the same way that I do. The guard position consistently across the NFL is weak.
Yes.
There are some,
I think.
Well, yeah, I do. I have a theory behind why that is. And don't worry, I'll tell you the theory. But I have a theory for why that is. But as a whole, interior offensive line play, particularly at the guard positions, is relatively weak across the NFL. It's one of the NFL's weaker positions. Here's why I think so. I think it starts back in college. You get a lot of those interior offensive linemen that are hyper athletic. So what do? They say, whoa, you're too athletic. You should be chasing down a quarterback. And they move them to the other side of the line. Or they end up getting bumped inside to being center because you want that guy that can snap and get to the second level on those wide zone run offenses that often exist in college. And so I think the athleticism of the position at the college level is seen and diagnosed so quickly and then turned into something else. It's why like edge rushers in the SEC struggled for a while to produce at the NFL, because all of those guys that were edge rushers in the SEC ended up getting moved to like tight end. They moved to the other side of the line and they said, no, go catch passes and run over people and do all that stuff. And I think there's something similar like that with the guard position collegiately and then coming into the NFL. And so a lot of guards in the NFL are tackle converts because you just take the guys with the short arms and say, you were good on the offensive line, but your arms are short, so play on the interior.
Right. That's like a lot of the guard position. And I think it's because like, I think it goes all the way back to the high school level, that kind of stuff.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
But when you are 6'6" and you're going to grow up to be, 310 pounds, they're never putting you on the interior in high school or in college. Then once you get to the NFL, if you also, have 32-inch arms instead of 33-inch arms, it's time to slide to the inside. Yep. And those guys are more dynamic athletes. Those guys are going to be higher drafted because they're tackles.
Yep.
That you kind of end up populating that a little bit. If you're, a 17 to 20-year-old athlete, you're like 6'2", you're going to, your frame is going to max out somewhere around like 300 pounds, maybe, or maybe even bigger.
Mm-hmm.
If you're that kind of athlete, but you're still that young, they're saying, no, let's bulk you way up.
Yeah.
And you're going to be put at nose. And so it's such an unsexy position that, it doesn't get the love that I think it should. And I think there's also like a positional value thing that I super disagree with on guards. Cause I think if you start learning about actual run plays, you realize like the importance of one lineman over another. Trying to prioritize that is a fool's errand. So all of that is, more general discussion about guards, but Dalton Reisner is somebody that I always thought was at the very least a starter, right? I don't think he's going to be the best starter. Might not even be the best starter on your team. But I mean, you got teams trotting out day 3 picks right now, competing 100%. For this spot. Get him in the camp, see what happens.
100%. I look at the Saints roster and Andrews Pete is their starting left guard, tackle convert from when he came into the NFL. Cesar Ruiz is right guard, center convert coming out of Michigan. The one guy that they drafted, or Nick Saldiveri this past offseason that they just drafted, who's going to play guard, tackle convert coming out of Old Dominion. The only natural guard that they've really drafted is Eric McCoy, and he's a center now. And so this is just so common what teams deal with. There you go. Some fun and informative offensive line talk. How about that?
There you go. But we should mention one more guy. I think we have to. We are contractually obligated to mention that Teddy Bridgewater is still out there without a team.
Commanders.
You and I, Commanders. Are you ready to be serious?
Yeah. Now that you're sold, are you ready to have an actual quarterback? Because Teddy Bridgewater could be that guy. Okay. Luke and I will never. How did you say it earlier? You'll never quit Teddy.
We'll never quit him.
We'll never do it.
I don't know how to quit him.
I don't know.
I'll never quit him.
No idea how to do it. And I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly okay with that. Teddy Bridgewater could still be a starting quarterback on some of these rosters. The Bucks, the Commanders. I would argue the Las Vegas Raiders.
Big shot to be a backup quarterback on a lot of rosters too. I mean, he's somebody that you should bring in if you just drafted somebody in the back end of like, I mean, this would kill me emotionally, but I think about like the Packers just brought in Sean Clifford to compete for their backup job behind Jordan Love.
Yeah,
bring Teddy in for that too.
100%.
I mean, don't let the 5th round pick just have the job.
Yeah, completely agree. I absolutely love it. All right, let's jump to Yike and Like coming up here in just a moment. We're going to get to our weekly segment, Yike and Like, here on the show, to where we think about things that make us say yike, and we also tell you things that make us say like from the week. So we got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On NFL. All right, everybody, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL. One more big shout out to all the everydayers out there. Thank you very much for making us your first listen every single Monday through Friday. Tony and James going to be with you in tomorrow's episode of Locked On NFL. Probably having about just as much fun as Luke and I have been having. So let's jump to, let's start with our yikes. I like what we did last week. We ended with the likes. This isn't my like, but I do like it. We ended with the likes. We ended on a high note. So let's get the yikes out of the way. What's your yike for this week, Luke? Sorry, I'm chuckling because I know what it is.
My yike for this week, outside of being lied to by the Lions and the Falcons, being deceived, is that the NFL has announced that it will make the Saturday night wildcard weekend game. So this last year, that was the Chargers-Jaguars comeback game, exclusive on Peacock and NFL Plus. Yikes.
All right. Did that get multiple yikes? Did that
I have at least 2 yikes for that one. One yike for
Peacock and one for NFL
and
Plus.
One for NFL Plus.
I love it. Okay, so wait, I'm gonna play the fool in this super shocker in this situation. Why should I be upset that it's exclusive to Peacock and NFL Plus?
Okay, so if you are one of the many NFL fans, many listeners to this podcast, who maybe have not yet cut the cord, who still pay for a regular TV package, who maybe can't afford to buy a whole bunch of different streaming services, and you would like to watch the playoffs, you will not be allowed to unless you subscribe to this service. As far as I understand. Now Peacock might do something where it's like, hey, this is free, but we're going to advertise the heck out of our service or something like that. But you would still need like a smart TV or access to some kind of streaming service or watch it on a computer or something weird. What I don't know, and in the articles that I have seen, so correct me if I'm wrong, but in the articles I have not seen any mention of this, is how this is going to interact with a local market. Because imagine the Saints make the playoffs, right, and they're in the 2-7 game, and that's the game that ends up on Saturday of Wild Card Weekend, and you gather your people around and you turn on the TV and Young Sheldon is on. And you can't watch.
Oh, I hate that.
The Saints.
I hate that alternative aggressively.
Yeah, and you don't have a Roku.
Like, you picked the perfectly incorrect show for me.
Yeah, exactly. And you're going like, why is Young Sheldon on my TV? I want to watch the Saints in the playoffs. Like, what's happening, right? That needs to be squared away. And even if it is one of those things that's not made, like, put behind a paywall on Peacock, because some things on Peacock are not put behind a paywall. Even if it is, you need to be able to cater this to people who just get their TV by satellite or by cable, which is still millions of your viewers, NFL. So it feels like I feel like we have to have like news still coming about this or something, because otherwise it does not make sense. It gets at least 1 yike from me, perhaps 2, if you don't open it up to other streaming services.
Yeah, and here's the other thing too. Like, I don't think people really think about this, but like, there's still a lot of our country that does not have internet access. Like, not everybody has access to the internet.
And not fast enough to stream a live event, even if you have enough internet access to get your email or whatever. If you live out in the boonies, how are you going to watch your favorite team?
Yeah. I hate it. Okay, you convinced me. I hate you, NFL. Democratize the playoffs.
Democratize the playoffs and democratize the Atlanta Falcons.
Just the Atlanta Falcons. I don't care what you do to them, as long as it's D-Lanta the Falcons.
D-Talon the Falcons. No,
just get rid of the Falcons as a whole. Oh well, Pete is calling. All right, my yike for this week is pretty simple. After that impassioned speech by Luke. My yike is that Matt Ryan is joining a broadcast team. And I'm not really like mad at it, Matt Ryan. I know this just feels like a continuation of my Atlanta Falcons hate all throughout this, but it is the pipeline. But like, what we know right now is that since Tony Romo, every quarterback that has tried to do this, it hasn't worked. unless you've put two quarterbacks together. But at the which would be like the Manning brothers, right? But the thing
the
about
Manning brothers, but they're doing a totally different
thing. And when I say that it hasn't worked, I don't mean that the quarterbacks who have tried this, Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, so on and so forth, I don't think that they've failed. I just think that like there is an expectation for such immediate success because of what Tony Romo brought to CBS that everybody is ready to just drop it as soon as it doesn't create that level of success. And so that's my yike. My yike is what a bad situation after a bad situation. After being in a bad situation with the Atlanta Falcons, Matt Ryan is now in. All right, I got it back.
And the Colts.
I got it back. Yeah, I kind of.
At least he's going to CBS, right?
Yes.
At least he won't have to pair with Jim Nantz, who will inevitably suck out his life force so that he can live another 100 years. It's happening. It happened to Phil Simms. It's happening to Tony Romo. Jim Nantz is an energy vampire, and we as a nation need to talk about it.
We should be talking about this more. But not today because we have to get to the likes. But maybe we'll come back for this discourse.
We'll come back to the great expose of Jim Nantz, who is stealing the youth from quarterbacks who come color commentate with him so that he can. He's been alive since 1806. There are records of this. Okay,
I think my like is the year 18. Well, not the year 1806. I don't want anything to do with the year 1806. Yeah. But like the fact that Jim Nantz has been alive since 1806, that's a like for me.
I mean, he's seen a lot.
Yeah,
quite a few Masters.
A lot. All right, let's look at Masters Tournament. Let's look at our likes for today. I'll start with mine because Luke's broken. Hey, it finally happened. My yike from a couple of weeks ago has turned into a like. Dan Snyder's no longer an owner in the NFL. It finally happened. The Commanders are sold.
Gone. The Commanders are sold.
Yes. And a lot of people have hit me with the question when I have talked about Dan Snyder no longer being the owner of the Commanders. They've been like, oh, well, are they going to go down the road of like changing the name back and all this other stuff? It's worth a reminder that like I think the NFL has a thing where it's like once you change the name, you have to stick with that name for like 5 years. And of course, when you change the name, you have to rebuy all of the merchandise and stuff like that. So I don't think that there's going to be any type of like, okay, well, Commanders didn't really work or whatever discourse around like changing the name or anything like that. But like the ownership shift is a good one that is necessary. Shout out to Dan Snyder for bamboozling someone into buying, let's just say, an organization that has a lot of business still left to do. Things that have nothing to do with football, and to get what was it sold for like 6.
We won't say what their jobs are asking questions. That's all we'll say.
Yes, many people are asking, and so I look at like
some
the
of them are elected, some of them aren't.
But I look at the Commanders selling for $6 billion, which we looked at it before the show. The last team to sell, of course, was the Carolina Panthers, who did so for like $2.25 billion. Luke and I created a whole list of things that are more expensive than the
like a half-hour
Washington Commanders. Way too much time. We no longer have time to talk about it here on the show.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll come back to it as some content later on. But there are a lot of things more expensive than the Washington Commanders, but also a lot of things less expensive than the Washington Commanders. And so like this fact that they sold like for $6 billion. Yes. There's a great
three
example.
Hubble telescopes.
There you go. Great example.
With money used.
We as Americans will do anything that we can to measure stuff without actually having to use measurements. And so what we'll tell you now is that it's 3 Hubble telescopes worth of a football team, which is wild to consider. So pretty incredible.
Maybe they can find a quarterback with all those.
Hopefully. Teddy Bridgewater, anybody? Yeah. All right. What's your like to wrap
there?
This up?
You don't need a Hubble.
He's literally
I'll be quick. When Todd Bowles was in the NFL after he at a certain point he promised his mother that he would graduate college. Well, this week he did graduate college.
How awesome.
Good for Todd Bowles. He walked, had the graduate hat. I don't know what you call it, the like square cap and everything.
Oh, yeah.
It was a whole bunch of cute pictures, a great promise, a great story. Very happy for Todd Bowles, and a great note to wrap this thing out on, because that's just cool. Good for him.
Super cool. Super cool. No caveats at all. Isn't that nice? We got some feel-good stories from the NFL this past week. Foster Moreau signing with the Saints after his cancer diagnosis, his Hodgkin's lymphoma diagnosis. Tom Brady being honored, I guess, is a thing. The medical staffer who saved the life of DeMar Hamlin is now a part of a football staff. Like, there's just some really cool stuff around the NFL. So lots of likes this week.
We love wholesome content.
With the wholesome content. All right, y'all. We appreciate you very much for tuning in for another episode of Locked On NFL. For Luke Braun, I am Ross Jackson. You can follow Luke on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL, myself on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. If you don't, it's fine. I don't blame you. You can also go and come back tomorrow.
If you made it all the way through this and you don't follow us and at Locked On Network on Twitter,
I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. It's the least you can do at this point. I mean, there's no other bridge left to cross.
If anything, we should be apologizing to you.
We're so sorry. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you for listening.
And thank you for listening here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.